The Cipher of Shadows. The rain drummed against the cobblestone streets of Paris, a rhythmic whisper against the city's timeless secrets. Detective Peter Caldwell pulled his coat tighter, his sharp gaze fixated on the dimly lit alley where the crime had unfolded just hours before. The scent of damp earth mingled with the metallic tang of blood. "You think it's connected?" Nicole Vasseur, his partner and forensic analyst, crouched beside the chalk outline. Her keen eyes scanned the scene with surgical precision. Peter exhaled sharply, glancing at the strange symbol carved into the brick wall beside the body. A spiral interwoven with cryptic lettering. "No doubt. This isn't just a murder, it's a message." Nicole stood, brushing the rain from her auburn hair. "Then we need to decipher it. Fast." The victim, Henri Gautier, had been an esteemed historian specializing in lost cryptographic codes. His death wasn't random. The wound on his chest was precise, almost ritualistic. But the true puzzle lay in the parchment clenched in his fist. Peter carefully pried it open, revealing a sequence of numbers and symbols. "Looks like a cipher," he muttered. "And from the way it's coded. This isn't just some random encryption. This is Dupin-level genius." Nicole's lips curled into a smirk. "Then let's play. The chase begins." The moment they stepped into Gautier's study, it was clear someone had been there before them. Books lay scattered, drawers upturned. The faint scent of cigar smoke lingered in the air. Whoever they were looking for something specific, Nicole noted, her fingers tracing the edge of an overturned lamp. Peter scanned the room, then his eyes settled on the old grandfather clock in the corner. It had been moved slightly, exposing a scrap of parchment wedged behind it. He retrieved it carefully. "Another cipher," Nicole murmured as she peered over his shoulder. This one was different, intricate symbols paired with Latin inscriptions. "Non est ad astra malii terras via," Peter read aloud. "There is no easy way from the earth to the stars." Nicole's eyes widened. "That's from Seneca. It's about a journey. Maybe a location?" Peter's mind raced. "Or a treasure." A sudden crash from downstairs made them freeze. Footsteps pounded against the wooden floors. Someone was inside. Nicole grabbed the closest weapon, a heavy candlestick holder, while Peter reached for his revolver. They moved in tandem, stepping out into the darkened hallway. A shadow flitted past the doorway, then another crash. Peter bolted forward, gun raised. "Stop. Police." The figure didn't listen. Instead, they lunged through a shattered window, their dark cloak billowing like a phantom's wings before they disappeared into the stormy night. Nicole reached the window just in time to see a black car speed away. "They took something." Peter's jaw clenched. "Then we find out what." The secret of the code. Hours later, they sat in the archives of the Bibliothèque Nationale, the parchment spread across the old wooden table. Rain continued to pelt against the grand windows, casting eerie reflections of flickering candlelight. Nicole traced her fingers along the symbols. "I think I've seen this sequence before. In the Voynich manuscript. It's an unbreakable code." Peter leaned in. "Then we need to think like the one who created it. If Gautier left this for us, it means he knew something. Something big." A librarian approached hesitantly. "You asked about lost cryptographic texts? I found this in the restricted section." She placed an ancient leather-bound book before them. "The Cipher of Shadows," Nicole whispered as she read the title. The pages were filled with encrypted messages dating back centuries. And then, they found it, an exact match to the parchment Gautier had left behind. "This is it," Peter exclaimed. "A hidden map." Nicole's heart pounded. "To what?" Peter's eyes darkened. "The lost archives of Dupin." The final clue. Their search led them to an abandoned chapel on the outskirts of Paris. The moon cast elongated shadows over the decayed ruins. The air smelled of damp stone and old parchment. Nicole's flashlight flickered across the walls, illuminating engravings similar to the cipher. "This is the place." Peter stepped forward, running his fingers along the carvings. "We need to align the symbols." They worked together, pressing the ancient stones in sequence. A deep rumble vibrated through the chapel. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as a hidden door creaked open. Nicole swallowed hard. "Here we go." Beyond the doorway lay a chamber untouched by time. Shelves lined the walls, filled with manuscripts and artifacts dating back centuries. "The archives," Peter breathed. Nicole approached a pedestal at the center, where a single book lay open. This was what Gautier died for. Peter's fingers hovered over the pages. "And what others are willing to kill for." A gunshot rang out, shattering the moment. Nicole ducked instinctively as a bullet embedded itself in the stone beside her. We have company. Peter yelled. Figures emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by masks. The leader stepped forward, his voice like gravel. You should not have come. Peter raised his weapon. Funny, I was about to say the same thing. Chaos erupted. Bullets ricocheted against ancient walls. Nicole grabbed the book and sprinted towards an alternate exit. Peter, move. They fought their way through the ambush, dodging gunfire, using the ruins for cover. A masked assailant lunged at Nicole, but she twisted, using momentum to slam him into the stone floor. Peter fired a shot, grazing the leader's arm. Let's go. They barreled through the narrow tunnel, emerging into the open night. The city lights flickered in the distance, their only beacon of safety. Nicole clutched the book tightly. This changes everything. Peter nodded, breathless. And it's just the beginning. To be continued.
Ascent of Shadows. The perilous climb to conquer Earth's pinnacle. The howling wind roared through the narrow crevices of the jagged mountain, a stark reminder of the sheer force of nature. Nicole tightened her grip on the frozen rope, her knuckles a pale shade of white under her thick gloves. Behind her, Peter adjusted his ice axe, his gaze sweeping over the abyss below them. They were suspended thousands of feet above the ground, their only companions the biting cold and the relentless pull of gravity. Nicole, are you sure about this path? Peter's voice crackled through the comm link, his breath visible in the icy air. It's the only way, Peter, she replied, her tone resolute. We've come too far to turn back now. The two climbers had spent the last month preparing for this expedition, a daring attempt to reach the summit of the world's tallest and most treacherous peak. The mountain, cloaked in perpetual snow and mist, had claimed countless lives. But for Nicole and Peter, this was more than a climb. It was a test of endurance, willpower, and the unyielding human spirit. They pressed on, inching their way up the near vertical face. Each step was a battle against the elements. The wind seemed intent on peeling them off the mountain, while the sub-zero temperatures gnawed at their extremities. Despite the odds, their determination burned brighter than ever. Hours later, they reached a small ledge, barely wide enough for both of them to sit. Nicole pulled out a thermos, pouring steaming tea into a metal cup. Her hands shook as she passed it to Peter. Here, she said, her voice softer now. We need to stay hydrated. Peter accepted the cup with a nod, his eyes scanning the horizon. The sun was setting, casting an ethereal golden glow over the icy landscape. It was beautiful, yet unforgiving, a stark reminder of the mountain's duality. Do you ever think about why we do this? Peter asked, his voice carrying a hint of vulnerability. Nicole looked at him, her blue eyes reflecting the fading light. Because it's there, she said simply. Because the mountain challenges us to be more than we are. Peter smiled faintly, his breath catching as he looked at her. In that moment, he wasn't sure if it was the altitude or something else entirely that made his chest tighten. The night descended like a velvet curtain, bringing with it a bone-chilling cold. Nicole and Peter huddled together in their tent, the flimsy fabric barely shielding them from the elements. The radio crackled to life, a static-filled voice breaking the silence. Base camp to Nicole and Peter. Do you copy? Nicole reached for the radio, her fingers stiff from the cold. We copy. Base camp. Over. You're nearing the dead zone. Winds are picking up. Be cautious. Understood. Over and out. The dead zone. The words hung in the air like an ominous warning. Above a certain altitude, the oxygen levels were so low that the human body began to deteriorate. Every second spent, there was a race against time. The next morning, they resumed their climb. The air grew thinner with every step, each breath a laborious effort. Nicole's mind drifted to her younger brother, who had always looked up to her. She had promised him she would return safely. That promise was her anchor, her reason to keep moving forward. Peter, meanwhile, was battling his own demons. He thought of his father, a seasoned climber who had perished on a similar expedition years ago. This climb was his way of honoring his memory, of proving that the spirit of adventure lived on. They reached the final stretch as the first rays of dawn kissed the snow-covered peak. The summit was within sight, but the path was fraught with danger. A narrow ridge stretched before them, flanked by sheer drops on either side. The wind howled with renewed ferocity, whipping snow into their faces. "Stay close," Peter said, his voice firm. "We can't afford any mistakes now." Nicole nodded, her heart pounding as they inched their way across the ridge. Each step felt like an eternity, the weight of their ambition pressing down on them. Suddenly, the ice beneath Peter's foot gave way. He slipped, his body plummeting toward the abyss. Nicole's instincts kicked in as she drove her ice axe into the ridge and gripped the rope tethering them together. "Hold on, Peter," she screamed, her voice raw with desperation. Peter dangled precariously, his face pale but determined. "I'm trying." With every ounce of strength she had, Nicole began to pull him up. The rope bit into her hands, the strain nearly unbearable, but she refused to let go. Inch by inch, Peter clawed his way back onto the ridge, his breaths ragged. They collapsed onto the icy surface, their bodies trembling from the adrenaline. Nicole turned to Peter, her eyes blazing with emotion. "Don't you ever do that again," she said, her voice cracking. Peter managed a weak smile. "I didn't plan on it." Hours later, they stood on the summit, the world stretching out before them in an endless expanse of white and blue. The wind was fierce, but for the first time, it felt like a song, a tribute to their triumph. Nicole and Peter embraced, their exhaustion forgotten in the face of their achievement. They had conquered the mountain, but more importantly, they had conquered their fears and doubts. As they began their descent, the realization dawned on them. The climb was only half the journey. The mountain still held challenges, but they were no longer the same people who had started this expedition. They were stronger, braver, and united in a way that only the mountain could forge. And so, with the sun at their backs and the summit behind them, Nicole and Peter embarked on the next chapter of their adventure, forever changed by the ascent of shadows.